guys, how's everyone doing? It's such a grey, gloomy time in England at the moment, literally middle of June, but I'm trying to keep those positive vibes up, do you know what I mean? Can't let this weather affect me. Even though it sounds like it's affecting me, I haven't got a cold, I'm still got the hay fever. That bitch. So today, as promised, we're talking about hormone testing and yeah, things that you can request with your GP if you are going to go get your hormones tested. If you see me looking to the side in this video, it's because I've written all the tests down on my computer just to make sure I don't miss anything off. But I'm going to go through, some of them are like generic things I think you might expect, obviously, to ask for to be tested, but I'm also going to chuck in some things that I personally also like to get tested, and I'll explain why, as I think they're quite good markers of hormonal imbalances. Okay, so the first test you want to consider is your reproductive sex hormones. This is the obvious one. So these are things like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So let's just go through these three first. So estrogen, particularly for us women, is very important to test because this is our dominant hormone. If levels do come up high, this might indicate that your body just is not excreting estrogen properly. So I definitely would be looking at your liver, like how well are you metabolizing your estrogen and excreting it out of the body. Also looking at your estrogen load in general, like for example, even chemicals, like a lot of things that we touch can actually disrupt our estrogen. So you can also be looking at your toxic load. You can also be looking at food, like are you eating too many estrogen provoking foods? Like maybe it is too much soy, although some forms of soy actually contain phytoestrogens, which can be balancing. If someone has got very high estrogen levels, you want to be careful with more processed soys like soy milk, soy fake meats, things like that. They can actually be making the estrogen worse. So yeah, there's a couple of things you can be looking at, but just sticking with the tests in this video because I can get very carried away talking about things that you can do with each hormone. Estrogen is just a really important one to have as a marker, because also obviously the other thing we would be mindful of is disease progression can be triggered from having excess testosterone. No, we're not talking about that yet. Excess estrogen, so we want to make sure that it is within range. Obviously it can come up low as well, and if it does come up low, that is actually where things like phytoestrogens can come in beneficial, so organic tofu, organic tempeh, etc., to help get those estrogen levels back up. But yeah, estrogen, number one. Okay, so next let's talk about testosterone. So with testing, I like to get testosterone tested, but I also like to request your DHEA to be tested. So your DHEA is actually a more potent form of testosterone, and it's what's produced from your adrenal glands. So yeah, always get that tested. If you suspect your testosterone is high, yeah, I like to throw that in because sometimes people come up with normal levels of testosterone, but their DHEA is like through the roof. If your DHEA comes back high, definitely be looking at your stress pathways, look at your adrenal support. Yeah, look at my adrenal fatigue video, that can really help you with that area. And then with testosterone, I mean, testosterone is a common trigger for lots of the symptoms we get with hormone imbalances. Like it can be a big driver for acne. Not everyone's acne, but a lot of people do find testosterone is a big culprit. It can make the sebum of our skin more thicker and more oily. Yeah, it's not really a great friend for acne, I'm not gonna lie. And testosterone and DHEA as well, I mean, they're both forms of testosterone really. They can also contribute things to, you know, excess hair growth and darkened hair and things like that. So yeah, really good to check your testosterone, especially if you're suffering with acne. Really would get that tested to see where your levels are. And also actually hair loss as well. Oh my god, let me just throw that in as well. If you're suffering with hair loss, make sure you get your testosterone checked. I actually want to do a video on hair loss, maybe I will. Okay, next up we have progesterone. Really good one to get tested, particularly for ovulation function, to see, you know, how well you're ovulating, but also just for general knowledge to see where your levels are, because progesterone, particularly for skin, like if you are suffering with acne, progesterone is a skin loving hormone. Like progesterone does great things for the skin. I forgot to mention at the beginning, let's just quickly touch on when is the best time to have these tested, like these hormones, particularly with progesterone, and also later when I talk about any hormones related to ovulation. The best day is around the day 21 of the cycle. If not, maybe that second week in your follicular phase can also be okay, but ideally day 21 is the best time really to get the clear snapshot. So that's really important, because this is the difference between Dutch test and hormone testing. It's obviously blood tests are a snapshot on that day, whereas Dutch test, where you do the saliva testing, that you get a clear snapshot throughout the whole menstrual cycle. So it's important that if you're going to do blood tests, you get it on a day where you're giving yourself the best chance to see the clearer picture. But anyway, moving on from that, some other hormone tests I like to request is your LH and your FSH. So LH stands for luteinizing hormone and FSH stands for your follicular stimulating hormone. Your follicular stimulating hormone is what's active in the first part of the cycle, where it basically helps to mature the egg, getting it ready for ovulation. Then luteinizing hormone comes along, and that is what triggers the ovulation. So two incredibly important hormones in your menstrual cycle, and great to have your levels checked. Other things also to note, especially if you suspect PCOS, it's quite common for these levels to be raised. And also it's good to see what your ratio is as well. You know, some people find their LH is way higher and out of ratio with their FSH, so it's good to see how well they are balanced too. Next one I would add to the list is your sex hormone binding globulin. So this is a really interesting hormone to get tested. It actually can tell you a lot, because if you have high levels, actually before I explain this, I must say sex hormone binding globulin, oh my gosh, this binds to excess like estrogen and testosterone. And yeah, going back to what I was saying, the really interesting thing about this is that if you have high levels of sex hormone binding globulin, that can actually indicate that you have high excess like levels of estrogen in the body. So that's quite a nice indicator there. But also likewise the opposite direction, if your levels are low, this can actually indicate that you have high androgens in the body. Also it can indicate you have high prolactin levels and also high insulin growth factor 1 or insulin levels. So this is quite a nice test to start with. You know, if your levels do come back low, let's say, then your doctor, or you can ask your doctor, because you'll have this knowledge, you can say, okay, because this has come back low, can you please test now my insulin growth factor 1, my insulin, and maybe your prolactin if you haven't had that tested already. But yeah, I like to have this tested, particularly if you are suspecting PCOS, because sex hormone binding globulin tends to be low in those who have PCOS. So yeah, nice one to add to the list. And then let me just also touch on prolactin, because I just briefly mentioned that one just then. Prolactin, this is a one, you don't have to add this on, but it is quite nice, particularly if you do suspect PCOS actually. So prolactin is a hormone which stimulates milk production. So typically we should have low levels, but if your prolactin is high, like it's common to have high levels in pregnancy, because that's when we're going to stimulate our milk production. But if your levels are high and you're not pregnant, that can indicate possible PCOS. So yeah, that's another one if you wanted to add it to the list. So they are my main reproductive hormones that I get tested. Now, hormones, they don't just stop at reproduction. There's so many different hormones in our body. We have hormones with our mood, like serotonin, for example, like certain neurotransmitters are also considered hormones. Hormones are chemical messengers, basically, in the body, which go and tell certain parts of the body, like, to do its function. So we have our reproductive side, but we also have other hormones, in particular our thyroid hormones. So 100% I recommend you get your thyroid tested. So the standard test to request is your T3 and T4. These are the hormones that your thyroid produces. So it's good to see how much you're producing and seeing what the ratio is like with those. But the other one you want to get tested is your thyroid stimulating hormone, so your TSH. Now, this is really important, particularly just to see your overall function of your thyroid. Now, if your TSH levels come back very high, this can indicate an underactive thyroid, which we call hyperthyroidism. So that's basically just indicating that your thyroid is struggling and needs a bit of support. And this could either be subclinical, so this could be, you know, if it's only ever so slightly over, don't worry, it doesn't mean that you definitely have hyperthyroidism. It could just be subclinical hyperthyroidism, but it just means that you're on your way there. So it's important to catch it and support it as early as possible. But if it's the other end of the spectrum, if your thyroid stimulating hormones, your TSH is low, then that can indicate that your thyroid is overactive, so what we call hyperthyroidism. So yeah, your TSH is a really great marker. I always recommend having that one done. And then also to add on to that, it's also nice to have your thyroid antibodies tested as well at the same time whilst you're having your thyroid panel done. So the antibodies basically are going to detect if there is any autoimmune conditions there. So if it's underactive, just testing if there is any Hashimoto's possible that's present, or if it's overactive, we're looking at Graves. So yeah, this is kind of your thyroid panel. There is other hormones you can test with the thyroid, but like for example, your reverse T3 is a fantastic one to test. But if I'm going to be honest, GPs, they don't test that. I'd be very surprised if they were going to test your reverse T3 as well. I mean, if they do, fantastic, but yeah, I'm just kind of mentioning ones in today's video that I think you're likely to get at your GP. Okay, the next test I would also throw on is your iron, so your serum ferritin. Now, if I'm going to be honest, if you're going to get your serum ferritin, I'm always like, well, let's just get a full blood count, because yeah, you might as well, to be honest with you. So get a full blood count, but just make sure they do serum ferritin. That is the most important thing. Check where your iron levels are at. I actually have another video, I've just remembered, on things you should know about blood tests. And in that video, there's some more information, so definitely go check out that. But in that video, I talk about iron, and just to recap it here, the iron ranges are incredibly wide, okay? So they can go from about, it depends on your GP, but around 13 is like the bottom bracket. And I've had people come to me where their ranges go up to 300. It can really depend. Some of them go up to like 150. Yeah, it depends on your GP. But the point I'm trying to make here, levels from like 13 and under, that's where you're considered anemic. Now, the really frustrating thing, unfortunately, is that a lot of GPs, you just have to come up within the range and they'll just send you off like, yeah, you're fine, your levels are like normal. Like, I've had people come to me and their levels have come back as 15 and their doctor has told them nothing to worry about, like you're within range. Like, that in my eyes, I'm like, no, that's like borderline anemia. That is like, we need to get some iron supplements in you like ASAP. Your levels really should be around 70, okay? So that's what you need to look for when you're getting your levels checked. Try and make sure your levels are around 70. If they are a lot lower than that, definitely a sign that you need to give yourself some iron support. But yeah, particularly with hormones, obviously with menstrual cycle, especially with us losing a lot of blood, and just iron has a big role with our cycle in general. I just really would get it tested just to check where your levels are. And also, if you have symptoms of fatigue, a lot of tiredness, these can get really easily confused with hormone imbalance symptoms as well, particularly around our period. Like if you're so tired when you're on your period, actually it could be iron because you're losing a lot of blood and that's causing the fatigue. So yeah, really good one to add to the list. Okay, the next one you can also add to the list. It seems like a very long list, but yeah, I'm really just trying to give you all the information today. The next one I would add to the list is your HbA1c. So this is basically a marker of how well your body metabolizes your glucose. So yeah, I really like to have this done. This is a really common marker for people, particularly if they are concerned about diabetes. If you have diabetes running through a family, particularly like type 2 diabetes, really recommend getting this tested just to check your glucose response there. And also the reason I link it in with today's video with hormones is because one of the key pillars I would say to balancing hormones is to balance your blood sugar levels. Like really look after that, because your blood sugar levels really have a direct impact on your hormones, as they can play effect with your ovaries. They can, if you're overproducing insulin and that is an issue, it can actually stimulate more testosterone to be produced from the ovaries, for example. So yeah, there is a tight link, and I think it's a good one just to have checked as a little, overall checkup. Okay, so these are my top tests I would start with if you're going to go get blood tests with your GP. I really hope this video is helpful. Please do give it a thumbs up if you did find it helpful, and yeah, if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss any future content from me. But I love you guys so much, sending you all my hugs and positivity as always, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Mwah. Bye.